Okay, well, the conversation today is going to be around the idea of photography and how it turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. So we're going to be talking about how photographers harness this power of transforming the everyday into something meaningful, symbolic, interesting, and exciting. I think everybody's pretty aware of the fact that that photography has this power in its own right, but many photographers use that the benefit that photography allows us to look at the world in a new and a fresh way. So I want to introduce Martin Parr. Martin Parr is
Hi.
is a very well-known and influential photographer, book collector, as you can see behind us, postcard collector, ephemera collector, and all-around photo madman. So he's going to introduce the discussion, and then if you guys want to come in anytime, just feel free to pipe up, ask questions, and hopefully we'll get a good conversation going, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Parr.
Hi, thanks, Aaron.
Okay.
So the thing is, everybody's a photographer today, so what you have to remember is you've got to try and make your photography more interesting than other people's, because out there are millions of photographers. The secret of all this, really, in my estimation, is to think of the subject matter, and it's you, and you have to connect to that subject matter, and it's the quality of that connection that usually determines how good our photographs are. You have to find a subject matter which is suitable to you as a photographer, and then you have to get into it. Now, it could be a social situation, it could be an object, it could be something very dull, because one of the things that's interesting, following up what Aaron said, is that in the world, we get very complacent through photography because we're very familiar with our everyday circumstances, our everyday surroundings. Most of the photos that we see of those are usually quite boring because they're like Facebook pictures, all our friends smiling, or we tend to take pictures which are very obvious and very cliched. So if we think of subject matter as having much more to offer, and we find the right connection, then often that's a good starting point to making interesting work. Because, as I say, everyone's a photographer, you have to really give something extra. So your relationship to the world out there, to everyday things, to extraordinary things, is absolutely crucial to making photographs come alive and make them very personal. They should be very subjective. It's your viewpoint we're interested in, your connection to that viewpoint, which is absolutely crucial to the success of good photography. Take this book here. So this is a book I did in 1999. I know it's a long time ago now, but this consists just of details. So I photographed a lot of food in here. Oh, there's a detail. So here's a scene on the beach. Can we see it? And this is just the back view. So it doesn't say, it's a back view of some swimwear, but you can see the American flag and you see the partner or the wife holding his hand. And this just sort of, as a detail, is a good example of how you can almost say more by showing less. And what else do we have? Cup of tea, look at that. You see, I'm British. The one thing we do well in Britain is make good tea, okay? Well, you do pretty good tea in India as well, but we are top of the tea charts, right? And that is, if you like, my national identity. When I'm abroad, I dream of a good cup of tea. So that's nothing much of a picture. It's a small detail, but it actually works in the picture. What's on the next page? Yeah, look. See, this is just a catalogue of details. There's this man with a cigarette behind his ear. What a weird place to keep a cigarette. But so it's these details. You put them all together, you get like a narrative, you get a montage of details, and it really sort of works by building them up. Well, look, just to finish off, so I'm getting carried away now. Here's another shot. There's an American breakfast. It's like $5.99, help yourself. And that's jelly at the bottom there. You see that? That, by the way, is an apricot on some cottage cheese, but it looks like an egg. Remember, all photographs are lies. So I like the fact that photographs tell the truth and they also lie at the same time.
I have a question. Do you plan your shoots, and how do you pick your location, or do you just go with the flow?
There are two types of shoot. Firstly, the shoot where I'm actually assigned and asked to go by someone. And if that's the case, I'll have a producer working for me, and I will talk to the producer. I will say the kind of events I want to go to, the kind of permissions I want to get into, and we'll have quite a structured time, say the week worked out. We'll have anything from 8 in the morning till 11 at night. And then sometimes, if I'm photographing in England in the summertime, which I always like to do, I will just float round and wander around like a spirit, just sort of gliding through the English countryside or around the English seaside. So I have two different types of shoots. One is much more organized, heavily produced, and one is much more intuitive and free-flowing. Yeah. I like both. I think both have a different something to offer. So I tend to do either one shoot like that or the other shoot in a totally different style.
So they kind of balance each other out.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I like the different approaches, and both are valid, and both are very productive ways of finding out about things. Remember, one of the reasons why I'm a photographer is because I'm a very nosy person, and if you've got a camera, you can justify your presence anywhere, and it's an excuse to go and meet people and find out what's going on, and that's what I want to do. I'm a nosy person, so being a camera, being a photographer is just an excuse to go and nose around.
So Martin, when you photograph abroad, I mean, do you find yourself photographing differently than you photograph when you're in England and working on projects in England?
Quite possibly, insofar that England's a subject that I know best of all. I've been brought up here. I've photographed for many, many years in England. So I'm very familiar with it. While especially when you go to a country you haven't been to before and you start photographing, you have to sort of work out what you're going to try and say about this. You have to sort of read the landscape and the people and the whole society and try and find the icons that help you sort of distinguish what's going on. So that to me is a great challenge, is to try and work out, if you have, say, a week or 2 weeks in a country and you've been invited to do an exhibition or make a body of work, you have to work really hard to try and, you have to have a line, you have to have an approach, what it is you hope these photographs are going to say. And then you have to do the thing again of accumulating the jigsaw pieces to make the bigger picture.
Right.
And the bigger statement can be quite complicated. It doesn't have to be simplistic. Sometimes I go and photograph a place and it's quite straightforward, and sometimes I make it quite layered and quite complicated. I mean, I often do portraits. I like doing portraits, and there, especially with shopkeepers, people doing a job, it's a very good way to do what we call an environmental portrait, where you get people stood in front of something, and this is a great technique. And the other technique, of course, is to just do people as you find them casually. Then, when you get someone looking at the camera, that can be a problem, because often you'll have a nice scene, 3 or 4 people there interacting, and there's one person looking at you, and that can often ruin the picture. So, you have to just be patient. You have to take a lot of bad pictures. Don't be afraid to take bad pictures. That's one thing I would say to you all. You have to take a lot of bad pictures in order to know when you've got a good one. So I take more pictures that are rubbish than all of you put together. Okay? I want you to know that, because I take a lot of photographs. I take hundreds of thousands of pictures every year. Most of them are rubbish, but you need to be in the momentum to keep things going. So when you take a good picture, it'll just suddenly work, it'll happen, and you know when you've taken a good one, because you see it surrounded by all the usual rubbish that you take. So don't be afraid to take bad pictures, everyone. You need to take bad pictures to get the good ones.
So you would say more is better than this?
I would say take more, and the great thing now with digital technology, you can just delete your rubbish and it's not even clogging up your backup systems. I go through my camera and take out half the rubbish, then I download the rest and look at the other on a big screen to edit the pictures. Editing is absolutely crucial to photography. First off, you have to edit where you are, because where you stand is absolutely the first decision you make that tells you about the photograph. So you almost have to edit yourself in person, physically, when you're there, by deciding where to be, because that's very important to show the relationship you have to that subject matter. And then afterwards, don't be afraid to edit and don't be afraid to delete. If in doubt, kick it out. Okay, we might keep some things that have some interest, but I would say most people keep too many bad pictures.
When you're making photographs, do you know when you've taken a good photograph before having looked at the back of the camera?
You have a hunch that something's happening, okay? And you get excited. Sometimes that hunch doesn't work out. Okay, so the danger thing with it, say you go to a great event or something you really feel strongly about and you're there with the camera, you think, this is fantastic, this is really working, this is where I want to be. Your job, of course, is to translate that event into a photograph. Very often, we can't do that. We fail to do that. So, but we think because we've been there and we're excited that we've already got it. And then when you come away and you look later and you think, uh-oh, what happened? I'd missed it. So, sometimes you miss it. And sometimes you'll get a photo that works and you don't know why it works. That's the great mystery of photography. It's the easiest thing in the world and also the most difficult. So the fact that it is so unpredictable is the thing that really excites me now about being a photographer. The same thing that excited me 40 years ago when I started.
Is you never know what's
You never know when you're going to get a good picture.
Does anybody have any particular questions they want to ask Martin?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
Have you ever been contacted by someone who's recognized themselves in your images?
Yes, many, many times. And my general policy is that when someone recognizes himself, I send them a file or a print. So generally, I try and be generous. Sometimes I've had one picture, which is, I'll find it in a minute, where I've had at least 3 people claim that it was their mother, right? And they're trying to get a print from me. So, we have to really try and get people to prove sometimes that it really was them or their person or their relative. But yeah, I have a general policy of giving people a copy of the picture that we're in. When I do a portrait, I always give people a copy of that portrait. I send them back to them or send them a file. So I'm really very happy to do that. I think the least you can do is to give something back.
Yeah. And do you make your models sign a model release form?
No. I never bother. I mean, first off, in the UK and in most countries in the world, there are a few exceptions, like, say, France. You can photograph freely on the street. You can do anything with these photographs, and there's nothing people can do. In France, you can photograph as much as you want, but if you want to publish it, you have to technically have had the consent of that person for it to be published in a newspaper or a magazine. So when I'm photographing in France, and I don't often like to do this because it's so complicated, I literally have someone follow me around with a model release form, often 2 people. So it's very difficult there. But most places in the world, it's quite easy to photograph. I always say to people, especially in the UK, you've been photographed 50 times already today by the CCTVs. Why did you not object to that? We're photographed all the time, remember? So, you're just joining the club. And when someone says to me, there's this great quote from Gary Winogrand, who is a wonderful street photographer. Some woman went up to him and said, you've just taken my picture. He turned around and said to her, no, sorry, that was my picture that I just took. So who owns these photographs? That's the thing. But don't forget, in the UK and in most countries in the world, you're entitled to photograph in a public place. In the 40 years I've been photographing, the one thing that has changed more than anything else is the attitude towards photographing children. This whole thing of people think you might be a paedophile interested in children, that's something that sadly has come about because it's become quite high profile. So yes, indeed, I generally avoid photographing children unless I know it's a situation where I can talk to the parents. So for sure, like on the beach, I love to photograph on beaches. And now it'd be really difficult to photograph on the beach without people getting angry. I found the picture. This is the woman.
Is this your mother?
Yeah, if anyone says this is their mother, then they get a print, right? I've had at least 3 people say this is their mother. And then we have to go to this thing and saying, where was the picture taken? Oh, I don't know. And I had a Brazilian woman. This was taken in Spain, in Benidorm, and she was claiming that it was taken in Portugal or in Brazil. It's been very funny.
I have a question.
Okay.
So I run this amateur photography club, and I was wondering if you could use one phrase to inspire a bunch of people who are very new to photography. What would that be?
Well, I would say, we're coming back to this subject matter of the ordinary. Why don't you ask them to find the extraordinary within the ordinary? We're surrounded by ordinary things. So why don't you invite them as a competition or as a project to try and find something that's very ordinary that isn't ordinary, but because it's extraordinary by the way they photograph it, by heightening the reality and the strangeness of this familiarity.
Martin's he's well known for, well, I mean, he's well known as a collector as well as photographer, but he has a few books, and you probably can't see behind us, but there's a shoebox that says boring postcards. And he's published a whole series of boring postcards from all over the world, from Germany and from America and from the UK. That's right?
It is,
yes.
Indeed.
And so maybe the next assignment for your camera club should be boring. Photograph the most boring thing you can find.
How to make something boring look interesting. That's the ultimate challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. Martin, have you ever been in a camera club?
I have, yes. When I lived in Hebden Bridge, I was in the camera club in the 70s.
Yeah.
And they were really thrown by my photos. They didn't know what to make of them. So I'd either come last or top. They didn't know, because they didn't fit into camera club rules, so they couldn't read me. So that's it. You either did very well or they thought it was total rubbish.
Right.
I enjoyed it. It was a very good way of meeting people in the community. I was photographing in this small town called Hebden Bridge. So it was a very good way of me meeting a lot of people. And I was totally entertained by the rather crazy, deliciously old-fashioned ideas they had about photography.
Right. So your pictures didn't fly.
Well, sometimes they did. Sometimes they did well. And sometimes they completely flopped.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think I do better at the camera club in Bucharest.
Did you teach photography?
I used to teach photography for many, many years, but in the last 10, 20 years, I've done less teaching. Very, very occasionally I do a workshop. But in fact, talking of Finland, the time when I did most teaching was when I was a professor of photography at the University of Industrial Arts in Helsinki. And then that was 90 to 92. Since then, I've done less teaching. I do 5 days a year now at the documentary photography course in Newport.
So can I draw something from that? That Finland kind of sucked your teaching away from you?
No. It wasn't like that. It's just that because I joined Magnum. Magnum's this cooperative, and I started to do commercial work. I suddenly found I didn't need to teach to earn a living. I was able to go out and do editorial, my own work, selling prints, commercial assignments. So the need to teach, which in the first half of my career was my main income, had gone away. So Finland was the crescendo of my teaching career.
Okay.
Well, listen, folks, nice to meet you. I hope it's been useful and good shooting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Ole hyvä. Kiitos.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, the conversation today is going to be around the idea of photography and how it turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. So we're going to be talking about how photographers harness this power of transforming the everyday into something meaningful.
This really, in my estimation, is to think of the subject matter, and it's you, and you have to connect to that subject matter, and it's the quality of that connection that usually determines how good our photographs are. You have to find a subject matter which is suitable to you as a photographer, and then you have to get into it. Now, it could be a social situation.
To pipe up, ask questions, and hopefully we'll get a good conversation going, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Parr.
Hi, thanks, Aaron.
Okay.
So the thing is, everybody's a photographer today, so what you have to remember is you've got to try and make your photography more interesting than other people's, because out there are millions of photographers. The secret of all this...
Full, symbolic, interesting, and exciting. I think everybody's pretty aware of the fact that that photography has this power in its own right, but many photographers use that the benefit that photography allows us to look at the world in a new and a fresh way. So I want to introduce Martin Parr. Martin Parr is
Hi.
is a very well-known and influential photographer, book collector, as you can see behind us, postcard collector, ephemera collector, and all around photo madman. So he's going to introduce the discussion, and then if you guys want to come in anytime, just feel free.